everybody coming into Zoom today. Looks like we're also live on Facebook. Wahoo! The magic works. Thanks to Jamie Janover over there pushing the right buttons. Somehow it goes out and goes through all these networks and it all syncs up and it works. So thank God for that. So welcome to our November Resonance Academy Faculty Q&A. We've got people coming in on Zoom, zooming in right now, and on Facebook Live. And this is our monthly Q&A session for the Resonance Academy with our faculty. I'll introduce everybody in just a minute here. We welcome the participants here on Zoom who are part of our contributing members and people enrolled in our academy to post questions. This is the Q&A part, so you can post questions for the faculty. And we always enjoy what you guys put out there, and you always post some great challenges. And we have a fun time digging into the answers all together here. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Welcome to the Q&A. Welcome to the Academy. There's a chat down at the bottom, and you can say hi and let us know where you're coming in from today. And also then you'll see a little Q&A. Oh, I want to say on the chat, by the way, you want to make sure to switch over to where it says, instead of all panelists, have it say all panelists and attendees. There's a little selection thing you got to choose. Otherwise, it's only coming to us and not to everybody else. So make sure you're set for all panelists and attendees, and then put your chat in, say hi, let us know where you're coming in from. Great to have everybody joining. And then there's a little Q&A button down at the bottom where you can pop in a question for us. And if you could just put your questions there, don't put comments in there. If you would, put your comments in chat. And just put one or two questions in there for us. We will be looking at those and select what we can. There's also a voting system in the upvoting kind of thing in the Q&A, so you guys can vote up the questions you are most excited for us to address, and we'll do some of that, and everybody's going to kind of look for ones that are either specified for them or kind of piques our interest to go into. So yeah, with that, I want to welcome our esteemed faculty today of the Resonance Academy. We have William Brown there in his great Taurus Tech white lab coat, as always. And we got Jamie Janover coming in from whatever his headquarters is. I think you're in Colorado as well, as far as I recall. And then we have Adam Apollo, which he's somewhere out in the galaxy. We're not exactly sure quite which coordinates ever he's at, but
staying in orbit.
He's just staying, okay, he's staying in orbit. That's good. And I'm Marshall Lefferts, as you might see on the screen here. And I'm here in California. I just actually came back out to California from the East Coast. So I'll be here on California for the winter. Pretty excited about that. So yeah, go ahead and post questions for us. We always like to start with just a little check-in with the faculty to see what's happening, what's new and exciting, and maybe what's happening in some of the research. I know Adam has something he wants to share with us in a few minutes about what he's researching. But let's check in with Jamie and William. Jamie, what's cooking for you these days?
Oh, let's see. Well, I'm excited about the Resonance Science Foundation in general because, as you guys know, everybody in the world had to adjust their entire existence starting in March, along with Resonance Science Foundation. And so we changed a lot of stuff organizationally, and we made the core unified science course that we have that's been out since 2014, I think. It's now free, and it got free in April. And we've consistently seen people signing up, and I'm happy to report we now have over 70,000 people in the course. It wasn't very long ago that we announced that we had 60 and 50. So it's really encouraging to know, just in general, that in the world there's people that are interested and curious and questioning and probably also doubting some of the things they were taught, and they are looking and seeking for more resonant information, and they're getting it thanks to Resonant Science Foundation, who has a charter, and our mission is to get this unified science view out to the world. And so I'm basically here to report that the foundation that we are a part of is accomplishing its mission like never before. I would say this is among the most successful time periods for the foundation, and as well for Nassim and Olivier and Inez and William and all the researchers that are writing papers, because there's a very cool paper coming out soon from Nassim and Olivier that is kind of a unification of the unification as far as I know. So all things are great in the world of resonance. We also just launched a new course about 30 minutes ago in the Resonance Academy from Dr. Lydia. And she is an amazing researcher of ancient temples around the world. And as the guy who has ancient Egypt revisited as my course in the Resonance Academy, I'm of course very excited to have another kind of ancient technology, ancient history related course coming out. This one being about temples around the world. So I encourage you to check that out at resonance.org, the courses. There's also new courses that just came out on like healing, fractal anatomy. We've got sacred geometry, universal geometry from Jonathan Quinton. There's a whole bunch of stuff, not to mention Adam and William, who are on this call right now, also have courses. So that's my update. It's basically that Resonant Science is doing well, and that we super extra appreciate all the folks on Zoom right now, because these are our contributing members. And for only $5 a month, you get access to the first session of all of the courses in the Academy. So it's a huge value. I mean, it would take you hours and hours to just go through the first session of each course. Nice.
Have you read this book, Jamie?
No, that's Dr. Lydia's book. I have to do her book.
It's pretty awesome. It's like, it's probably 70-80% raw data on some of the most amazing energies of the temples around the world. It's just like raw readings and data and science with graphs of the like underlying, geology and the gases and energy fluctuations under the earth that are actually, part of what caused some of these temples to be such powerful conductors.
Nice. It's great to have some scientific data and like stuff from geology to physics to back up the stories that we've heard for a long time about temples. Oh, everybody went there to pray, and it's all about, the kind of culture of it. But no, this is the physics. Like, what are these temples doing in the physics? Is there a resonance that's set up? Yes, the answer. So I'm looking forward to that course. Thanks, Marshall.
Wow, fantastic.
Pass the baton here.
Thanks, Jamie. Awesome, great, thank you. I didn't know that was launching today. I'm super excited about that. Awesome, Dr. Lydia. Yeah, great. All right, William, what's cooking for you, man?
Yeah, well, that was a really exciting update from Jamie. Great to hear that. Actually, with Dr. Lydia, we're working with her on doing some testing with the arc crystals. She's actually going to be running a series of comprehensive tests at the university she's affiliated with. So it's going to be a great opportunity to work with her on doing some university-based experimentation, being able to have access to the equipment and facilities that they have to do things like, testing cell culture, so we can see what kind of changes are occurring at the molecular and genetic level when cells are treated with the arc crystals. And she has a whole lot of very interesting techniques and modalities to measure energy dynamics, the same kind of stuff she does with the sacred temples. So that's an exciting venture that is in the works now. And also with Inez, our other researcher. She was here visiting the labs not too long ago, and we sat down, me, her, and Nassim, and we set up an experiment for a consciousness experiment, testing some effects of consciousness. It's going to be very interesting to see. So with her research team down in Mexico City, she had done a series of tests showing this particular meditation technique that this individual was able to perform. They would register as a change in the detection of photons with this light sensitive meter. So it's this real physical quantifiable detection that they documented and actually published a paper around. And here at the lab at Taurus Tech, we actually do quite a bit of work with optics. In particular, I've done a lot of research around the optical properties of the arc crystal, which has very interesting, unique optical properties. In fact, for those who have an arc crystal, it has a demarcation for the optical axis. That's the axis of the crystal that is optically active. And so here, we've done measurements of things like photon emission from the arc crystals after being modulated with the harmonic flux resonator. So we have all this light detection equipment, and actually we have equipment that's far more sensitive than what they had access to. So we've got a photon multiplier tube that can register like 1 photon a second, as small as that kind of flux. So we're going to be doing this consciousness experiment where the individual is going to essentially remote view into our location and see if from a distance they can affect the count on this laser emission. Because in their previous experiments, they had shown that there was an effect on being able to change the count, the photon count from this laser. In the past, he could like go back, project back into the past and change the count, and also into the future. So, there's definite temporal changes that they've documented. We're going to go for the distance or spatial changes now. So there's also, a lot of interesting work with the lasers themselves. I've actually been working with some additional modulation of the arc crystals using laser phase conjugated laser applications from one of our colleagues, Dr. Todd, which is basically like a scale resonance, scale EM resonance pattern that you can use to get some pretty interesting effects with the arc crystals. So that's some other interesting research that is ongoing here.
Cool. That sounds really, really great. I imagine there's going to be at least 1 or 2 volunteers who are going to want to participate in that consciousness study in our group here. So that's great. Yeah, I whatever may be a means for people to participate, I'm sure that will become known, and we'll put something out if that's going to be the way it goes. But sounds awesome, man. That's great. Thanks, William.
Thank you.
All right, then Adam was saying at the beginning that he's been doing some really interesting research. I think he's always doing some very interesting research. But something new that he was just beginning to describe and wants to do a little bit of a initial overview discussion of that today, presentation of that today. So we're going to give Adam the floor for a few minutes here to walk us through some new research, some new insights, and we'll see where that takes us. So that's awesome, Adam. Always
Thanks,
great to have you
Marshall.
here.
Yeah, man. Good to be here as always. Sorry I missed you guys last month. And, uh, exciting research is par for the course for me in the Math Magicians group that I'm in with Robert and Jamie and Alan Green and others, and some of the stuff that we do through that little collective of scientists and mathematicians and magi. But this is some stuff that I kind of just broke ground on and introduced some to them. And there's a ton of correlations in what I'm going to show you with some of the mathematics that Robert's been working on, and stuff coming out of Talal's work as well, and a few other areas. And but it's so deeply ingrained in the heart of the unified physics that we're here teaching, that I really want to give the students here a little bit of a preview into what's coming down the pipe. And then perhaps later I'll do a more like extended course and really deep dive into these topics with everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen and drop us in to a little presentation here. There we go. And I'm really excited about this work, and I'm calling it space-time genetics and chromodynamics. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about proton chromodynamics. So just to get you guys back up to speed with me for a second, if you've seen my prior presentations and you know the work that I do in unified physics, I love to talk about that space-time is seeking equilibrium, right? It's a high energy lattice in tensegrity with equal push and pull between nodes. So it's trying to get into the sort of vector equilibrium state, tetrahedral matrix state that Nassim loves to talk about and show, the flower of life sort of pattern. However, in order to do this, the push and pull has to be really balanced between each of the nodes in this structure. So each PSU you can think of as this sort of 3D spherical interpenetrating structure, and that each one of these structural layers has an attractive bond pulling them together and a radiative bond pushing them apart. And that balance of push and pull is what gives us what Buckminster Fuller called the tensegrity dynamic. Now, this is interesting, of course, and it's cool to see everything in Flower of Lives, and it's great to see how we can, use tetrahedral arc crystals and build 64 tetrahedral matrices. But as I've communicated often in my courses and otherwise, when you have equilibrium, you don't get anything. In other words, there's no mass, there's no energy release. It's literally everything stable, equilibrium, no motion, no action, no energy. So it's the state of stillness. In other words, the state of space in which nothing is happening. But in order to have something happen, in order to have mass, to have some object come into being, what we have to do is actually cause a curvature in the structure. And to create curvature, one of these little nodes has to move out, and the rest curve or bend around the core, forming this sort of pentagonal structure. And those pentagonal structures form basically the units of curvature that cause the geodesic structure to curve. And also we have to have radiation. So some PSU actually has to radiate out while the others curve in. And that's going to give us this geodesic structure. Now I use this structural model to show people what the proton looks like, but keep in mind, we're talking about literally about 3 layers out from the core of the proton here. And the amount of layers going out is so big and so far that just one of these little branch lines becomes equated to about the size of a grain of sand, with the whole sphere being about from here to Alpha Centauri in radius. So it's a much bigger structure, but understanding the core of it and understanding how the layers build is really critical for us to understand the proton. So I also talk about like how space-time curvature occurs, equilibrium. You get the first unit of curvature with 1 radiative. You get the second unit of curvature with 2 radiatives. And I'm not going to go into all of this, but I just want you guys to understand that this is like how in a tensegrity structure, curvature actually initiates and happens. And this curvature, of course, is going to then give rise to the nature of the proton itself. and what the proton is. And the proton is the fundamental, most stable unit of mass and matter that we have in our experience. It is what all mass is. It is the source of all the gravity that we experience. And it's all based on this little geometry right here in the center. Now, I started to look at what it looks like to actually map these pentagonal intersections from the nucleus of the proton all the way out to the surface. And fascinatingly enough, when you map these pentagonal layers as they're going out, what you get is something that looks like this. And that structure, which when you rotate a pentagon and you keep it rotating, what you get is when you have a half-step pentagon rotation is what's generally called a decagrammal or decagonal or 10-sided rotational structure. On the left here, you can see some of my initial sketches thinking about the kind of dodecahedral core and these pentagonal radiative lines going out, and some of the aspects of Planck force and Planck mass and Planck volume in some of my initial thinking. But the deeper that I got into this, the more I started thinking about these cables running from the core to the outside of the proton as being the place where it's most capable of mobilizing information energy from the singularity at the core out to the surface and back. So you can think of these as pipelines of information. And now each one of the layers, of course, is going to have its own metric or encoded information established on it, its own harmonic, so to speak. And so what we're getting actually is like a data stream that's moving through the polar vortex of the proton and is also moving through the 10 other pentagonal vortices that are around the sphere. So now if we look at the proton again, you can see here in this little model that I've created, you've got a polar vortex at the top, a polar vortex at the bottom. And then in order to allow the sphere to curve all the way, you have 5 pentagons in the upper hemisphere, 5 in the lower. You can see in the polar view kind of how that looks like a pentagram from the top. And if we look at it from the side, as you see in the upper right there, just right at the top of the screen, you can imagine each one of these as being tunnels or tubes going all the way in and down where PSU are transmitting in and out of this core. So you got these vortices where this information energy is able to pass from the surface of the proton all the way down into what I call the excavated dodecahedral core of the proton, which forms an even smaller sub-Planckian icosahedron by the points in the very, very center of it. Now, this information energy is able to then pass from the outside edge of the proton into the core of the proton. And then where does it go? Well, it enters a singularity, but information energy, we want to say, is conserved. So it's also going to pass back out. And for it to travel back out, it's going to go back out through one or another of these other pipelines and make its way back out to the surface. And in this way, each proton has the capacity to store information and communicate the information in spacetime. Now, this gets even more exciting and interesting as I go a little further here, because we start noticing some really fascinating patterns about this information energy structure. For example, when we take a pentagram, we rotate it 72 degrees. We know that to rotate it all the way, it's going to go 360 degrees. So in order for it to rotate all the way and one additional step in rotation, it's going to go 432 degrees. Now that's interesting. And if we map out each one of the rotation steps of this pentagonal vortice spiral, so to speak, that's built into the proton here, it takes 13 steps to get all the way to the 432 degree rotation. Now, if we start breaking this down a little bit more, we could see that inside of this structure, there could even be sequence batches, as we find in other types of information structures, where you have a series of sort of binary encodings, and then you have stop sequences. And interestingly enough, if we take a series of these different 13-step sequences and we roll them together, we end up with this pattern where we can very, very easily see 60 triangular tensegrity units with 12 core compression zones. In other words, these different sequence batches with stop units in between, which is exactly how DNA operates. Now it gets even more interesting when we start to realize that each one of these rotational units can actually act as a binary code form. So it can literally be 0 or 1, or in other words, 0 and 9. And the flow of this binary encoding is actually perfectly designed as an information structure. So what else is interesting about this? Well, there's 64 codons in our DNA. So wouldn't it be interesting if the proton, of course, was a fractal representation of the information structure that's going inside of our DNA? It's the microcosm to our DNA's macrocosm. Now, also, 13 steps to 432-degree rotation, right? So for one time for this turn to happen, we get 13 steps to do that, and for this structure to basically complete a circuit and go to the next circuit. Well, the number of seconds in the estimated age of the universe just happens to be 4.32 times 10 to the 17, if we assume 13.7 billion years since the Big Bang. And where else do we see the number 13 and 432? Well, we have 13 moon cycles in a year. We have 432 times 200 gives us the moon orbital speed. 432 times 2000 gives us the sun's equatorial diameter in miles. 43,200 divided by 2 gives us Earth's circumference in nautical miles. 432 times 200 gives us in a day the number of seconds. But in addition, in Planck time, if we take the estimated age of the universe, we break seconds down into Planck time, or Planck seconds as they're sometimes called, we get 8.07719 times 10 to the 60th. And if you guys are looking at that, you might notice that 10 to the 60th might be an important number. Do you remember this slide? Have you guys ever seen this particular slide from Quantum Gravity and the Holographic Mass, or Nassim ever presenting the structure of the proton? Well, that's right. There happens to be 10 to the 60th PSU inside the proton. So if there's 10 to the 60th PSU in the volume of the proton, and there's 10 to the 60th Planck seconds in the entire universe, then wouldn't it serve that we consider the possibility that there's a direct correlation between time itself and the entire age of the universe and the PSU in a single proton? And so what this means, what this could mean, and where I'm going to take you guys much, much further in a future discussion on this, is perhaps the structure of the entire proton is not just, holographically mapped to the universe by association to the number of protons in the universe or to the entanglement across the universe, but what if every PSU in the proton is literally mapped to one of the Planck seconds in the age of the universe, so that the entire spherical structure of every proton is literally a fractal hard drive of every single moment in existence back to the beginning of time. All right, I'll leave you guys with that one.
Wow, man. That is some deep insights and correlations going on there. It makes me,
I was going as fast as I could, so just teasing.
You did a good job. That was really, you rolled right through. That was amazing. Beautiful imagery that helped it tremendously to follow what you were saying. And I know you're going to develop that a lot further. Really, that correlation between holographic mass, as has been described in the unified physics theory throughout the whole course, and then this holochronic relationship where time itself would also be in that same dynamic where the whole was present inside every component, and that's that correlation in terms of the quantization factor there is very compelling. Nice work, nice insights there. Looking forward to seeing where you go with that and further development on that. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, thanks. It's been keeping me up at night, so I'm sure I'll come out with more layers of it. And I've got a ton of math here too, but I just didn't want to get into too much of the detail. so we can focus on this Q&A.
No, that was a great intro, and like you said, you'll develop that into something that can be presented more fully, whether that's in a presentation that you do, a webinar, maybe a course down the road, whatever it might be.
Sounds like fun.
But,
That's really awesome
that's
too.
some profound work.
That the proton has this entanglement structure, not only with every other proton, but as you're describing here, an entanglement structure across time, where each one of those internal PSUs could have a connection going back to every Planck second in the universe.
All right.
I wonder, does that mean that as time goes on, the proton would increase in size more?
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly, because I've been thinking about the PSU absorbing through the polar vortices into the core, but there's literally 5 times more outputs in the proton than there are inputs, which suggests that the proton grows. In every Planck second, the proton is growing, right? But it's growing just as the entire universe is growing. So because we're in this equal balanced relationship between the growth of the universe and the growth of the proton, everything is growing at the same rate. And obviously we're, Planck spherical units, like I said, a grain of sand to, a sphere from here to Alpha Centauri is the size of the proton. So, single grains of sand being added to that, even at extremely high rate, it's just not that noticeable of a difference. But the part that I really wanted to share this so that you could see it, William, is that it also suggests that in the same way that DNA is carrying literally a record of time of all life that has come to make us up as our body, the proton is literally carrying the DNA record of the entire universal structure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's like different hierarchical levels. So it's like the DNA is a record of almost everything that's happened in your lineage since the age of the Earth. And then it's also made of protons. Each of those protons have a record of everything that's happened, the history of the universe. Yeah. Very interesting.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, thanks for that, Adam. That was awesome. Great presentation. Very clear and very succinct and very compelling.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Great. Well, we can jump into some Q&A. I've been moving actually the past couple of weeks from the East Coast to the West Coast, so my whole attention has kind of been on that big transition. So I don't have a update beyond that for today. So we can dive into some Q&A here.
William, you better get ready. There's quite a list of questions for William.
I think William's always ready.
Yeah, he's ready.
I was born ready. No.
You were born ready. So, William, do you want to start? There's a
and actually, I'll just go with this one at the top of the list here from Connie Main. Did I ever get that conversation with Dr. Tom Cohen? Yes. Yeah. We had a nice hour-long Zoom discussion.
Why don't you just tell us who he is?
Okay. Yeah. So Dr. Cohen, he came on to my radar at the start of this COVID situation because there's a lot of questions that started to come to the fore that I didn't personally realize were still topics of debate, such as whether there are such thing as microbes, if there's such thing as bacteria, viruses, and less extreme sides of that, do these microorganisms cause diseases? Or are the diseases caused by something else, and we're erroneously attributing them to these microorganisms? I didn't realize that these were things that were still up for debate, just because with my background, it was, just pretty straightforward. I mean, I work with microorganisms, so it's like, to ask if they're real for me is like weird, because I work directly with them. But Dr. Cohen came into my attention because he had some pretty popular videos online talking about his theory that diseases are not caused by really, I guess you would even say, external factors. That it's more of an internal disruption, and that in particular that diseases are not caused by microorganisms. I think even going so far as to say that there are no such thing as microorganisms, and certainly not viruses, in his presentation of his ideas. And so, I was just getting flooded with people, asking, is there any validity to what these people are saying? What is the science around this topic? And, I was just providing as much of the information as I could that I had. And, it sometimes would make people very angry, just, sharing what I understood to be the science of it, but and so actually in my conversation with Dr. Cohen, so one of these people who had been asking me, is there any validity to what's being said? He said, wouldn't it be great if we could get you and Dr. Cohen on a call together? We could like sort this out, see, is there any common ground? What is the disagreement about, these kind of things. So, the talk with him was a little bit contentious at times. I had to be very sure that, I wasn't attacking him or even necessarily attacking his ideas, just, offering a counter argument that, these are some of the facts as I know them. But I can't say that at the end of the conversation, we didn't come to an agreement. But he actually, though, did take on a lot of the ideas that we share from the Resonance Science Foundation, which I think was a great benefit to our having talked, because the individual who arranged for our meeting and discussion actually sent me an excerpt from Dr. Cohen's book that was published about a month later, and it had a section on resonance science. And he seemed pretty sure that that was an addition that occurred after me and Dr. Cohen had spoken. And so, I think it was, in that sense, a beneficial conversation. I mean, not only because I was able to better understand where he's coming from, but also I think that having been able to share with him the ideas around a more a unified science model broadens his scope of understanding as well. So it was an interesting discussion.
Hi, William. One of the questions that I had about it, and I had actually sent a message off very early on to Dr. Cohen about this, is that, pardon me, his postulate is that the viruses themselves are actually exosomes, and they're produced from inside the body, and they're produced as a consequence of existential threat to the organism. So And so his whole theory has to do with what kind of threats our physical organism is subject to. And then his question is, well, how does this all get transferred from person to person at far-flung areas of the earth when there's been no travel there and all of that? Community spread is what they've called it. And now, of course, you know, it's kind of a mood issue because it's spread all over the place. But early on, it wasn't. And so what I had talked to him about was the possibility of morphogenic exposure or morphogenic transfer, which really goes to the heart of resonance science, unified physics. Did you discuss any of that aspect with him at all? The morphogenic field aspect?
You know, our conversation didn't get that deep. That would have been the level at which we'd gone to it, perhaps if we had more time, you know, because certainly, you know, the morphogenic field is playing a huge role in, you know, the emergence of novel viruses, novel pathogens, and their infectiousness, how they're able to spread. Yeah, so that would have been a really a great topic to get to discuss with him. And I think, though, that he kind of picked up on that without us having gotten that far, because the excerpt from his book that was sent to me was basically going to that idea of field resonance, you know, and it's an important factor when considering these kind of things on, you know, how disease states can be transferred, you know, because it certainly is possible that they can be transferred via like a resonance effect, you know. So I mean, and that's kind of like the idea where it's not even direct physical contact or a direct physical like motite that's being the agent of transmission, but just even like a sympathetic energetic resonance that can transfer one state to the other. You know, that's something that's not present in, let's say, Western medical science, but is a significant contributing factor to these kind of problems.
I think he makes the correlation with how information is transferred in the botany world, like, for example, trees.
Mm-hmm.
When a tree is under threat, it sends out hormones outside of its leaves, or however it's, you know, whatever they've got. And other trees pick up on it. And so he's making that correlation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So it's almost like, yeah, we can be having a similar kind of, I guess you almost call it like a sympathetic response to what's happening with individuals around us. Yeah, you know, and I think that, you know, with these things, there's important aspects to these ideas. You know, I mean, especially on considering, you know, what are you doing with your internal state to keep yourself healthy? You know, it's not all just external factors that are the problem. You know, but then just for me though, there's always also just the hard science of it. You know, so like the postulation, the idea that exosomes are viruses. You know, the problem with that is that we can study these things at the molecular level. You know, we can look at the molecular coat of an exosome and the molecular coat of a virus. I mean, like with scanning electron microscopy, X-ray crystallization, spectroscopy. So, I mean, you can get like really atomic level detailed descriptions of what these things are made of, the differences between them. And, you know, it's just that there are clear and distinct differences between an endogenously produced exosome and the virus. You know, I mean, at the molecular level, you know, you can just very distinctly delineate the differences between the two. And, you know, I kind of try to use the analogy of taxonomy. You know, it's like, you know, when we classify different animals, you know, we can pretty well, you know, distinguish a zebra from an elephant based on their physical characteristics. For a molecular biologist, you know, the molecular signatures of these different microscopic particles, they're as distinguishable as a zebra and a elephant. You know, I don't know if that analogy tracks for everyone, but you know, and then, you know, there's other factors like, you know, you can look inside, you know, these things carry RNA. You know, you can look at that RNA and do comparisons. And, you know, like if you take the RNA from a virus, you know, it very clearly doesn't have any match to anything in the human genome, you know, except for small sequences that are endogenous human retroviral elements. You know, so there's certain things like this, but
well, that's good. Let's leave that there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground there, and we got a lot of other questions to come to. And then there is one more from Connie about the arc crystal, which we can do real quick, I think.
Okay.
Thank you for this, Connie. Saying about the arc crystals, I assume they've been charged to do their particular task. So how is it assured that this specific charge isn't altered by those who touch them?
Yeah, so the thing is that the way that the arc crystal is modulated is that there is what you could think of as like a continuous driving dynamic, a driving force almost. So, you know, it's not like you struck a bell and it's ringing and then, you know, it's carrying around that frequency. And now if something else hits it, it's going to ring differently. You know, it's more like if there's a continuous harmonic oscillation of that bell that kept it ringing at a specific frequency. And even if you say struck it differently, that would be dampened and it would just immediately go back to that resonant frequency, that harmonic oscillation that you've set up. So there's kind of a driving dynamic that's the oscillation at the atomic scale of the arc crystal. And that's achieved via the harmonic flux resonator, the treatment with the harmonic flux resonator modulation. You know, it sets up a very specific harmonic frequency of spin rotation of an electromagnetic field in a resonant cavity. And so, you know, it's you know, the arc crystal is specifically engineered to couple to that frequency so that it's at a resonance point. And our studies have shown that once you imbue it with that oscillation, it lasts indefinitely. Now, you know, in, let's say, classical physics, that would kind of be like a violation of the law of conservation of energy, because how is it constantly getting this driving force to keep it at that specific oscillatory frequency? Well, we're coupling it to the vacuum energy structure. So, you know, we believe that the energy is coming from the vacuum structure. So there's a constant flux of energy into it. And we've seen indications of this in things like the continuous photon emission, ultra weak photon emission by the modulated arc crystals, and other kind of effects. Actually, there was one that's related to that. Somebody had asked if the arc crystals perhaps increase the temperature of water. And I have seen that effect. Actually, it was one of the first effects I ever saw because, you know, we were going to test plants and I had these lima beans and I was just germinating them in between two paper towels, wetted paper towels. You know, it's a really nice, clean way to germinate them, and you can measure the root growth and the stalk length and everything. And one of the first things I ever noticed in testing is that our arc crystal group would always the next day be dry, whereas the control group would still be wet. And so I almost had to give a little bit of extra water to keep our arc crystal group at the same moisture content as the control. And what else could explain that? I mean, they're sitting side by side, other than there's more energy going into that arc crystal group, more energy going into the water. It's evaporating quicker because it has more energy. You know, so there are definite indications of that. And again, where's that energy coming from? We believe that, you know, we've coupled these arc crystals to the vacuum, and our testing has shown that there is a flux of energy from the vacuum through the crystals.
Going to your bell analogy, William, it's a great one, because if you think of space-time as the thing that's making the sound, so the vacuum is vibrating and making a sound, and we're constructing an object that is designed, aligned enough with the structure that's vibrating with that sound to stay vibrating with that sound. So you can think of yourself as putting a little imprint on that sound. And yeah, you have your own song. Like, it took a while for each of my arc crystals to feel totally comfortable sitting on my chest, you know, like adapting to the harmonics of my body. But the space-time resonance is much, much greater than just my body, right? Because it's everywhere and it's everything. Like, all of space-time is singing, you know. And so I have to kind of like vibrate to and harmonize, figure out how my field can harmonize with that root tone, so to speak. That's the way I like to think about it.
But that is interesting, that it can still seem to pick up some unique, let's say, vibrational
Absolutely.
signatures. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, totally. I mean, just like a bell or an instrument, it can pick up other, you know, higher harmonic, you know, overlays and overtones. If those overtones are vastly dysphonic from the root tone, it's maybe not going to pick it up as well, right? But like, if they're highly harmonic with the root tone, yeah, absolutely. Those will be maintained and actually strengthened and persist longer, because the root tone is helping to vibrate those overtones, you know, more continuously as well.
Okay, Adam, thank you for that, because that's very consistent with my work with crystals. And these are crystals that are already, you know, made by the planet. So part of my question is that attunement, the original attunement, does that happen in the manufacturing process, or do you go and attune them after the crystal is already grown? Because doesn't it take about 2 years for you to grow the crystal?
Yes.
Let's just be brief on this answer so we can get on to some more questions too. So just be brief.
There's a 2-year period for them to grow, but the resonant frequency for the crystals are established via the specification of their geometric cut, so to speak. You know, so when they're grown, you know, they're basically these large slabs, you know, and then from there, the tetrahedral geometry with exact specifications is formed. And, you know, those dimensions are largely what determines the resonant frequency of the crystals.
Well, thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you.
Thanks as always, Connie, for some great questions and for joining us. Appreciate it. Great. Adam, do you want to did you have something you found that you want to jump in on? We don't have to go down the list sequentially.
Well, yeah, I just want to check on Jamie if unless you want to jump in. I mean, I can totally take another one if you don't have one, Jamie.
I could actually piggyback on what we were talking about, because I'm noticing in the chat, William is so deep in what he says that I think that it would be worth doing a little explanation for the new folks on this call who have never seen or don't know what an arc crystal is, don't know what the resonator is, the resonator room, coupling with the vacuum. Okay, so William's holding an arc crystal. Those are crystals that are grown in a laboratory. That's what these guys were talking about for a long time. And they grow very slowly, and then they cut them very precisely so that they're exactly tetrahedral. And so all of the molecules are pointing in the same direction. So there's an orientation to the crystals. That's why William talks about the axes, or Nassim always calls them the axe for short. That gets charged or modulated, as William said, in a room with a device that Nassim theorized about in the 90s and built the early prototype of in 1999 in Santa Cruz, California in his lab. Then later he moved to Hawaii and he improved it on the Big Island. Then he moved it to Kauai and he improved it again. Then he moved it to Southern California to a lab called Taurus Tech. And that's where William is right now. There's actually a question in the chat that if you're on Facebook, you can't see, that people were like, what's the resonator room? What's up with Taurus Tech? What's it like at Taurus Tech? Okay, so great. Thank you for sharing this, Adam. This is the resonator. Oh, great, Adam. This is good. This is the device that is called the resonator, or the harmonic flux resonator. And William could speak to the technical aspects of this more than I can, because he works with this device in the lab every day. I'm not at the lab. I'm in Colorado. I've been in this room. You can see those shelves that are around the resonator. Those are the shelves that they put the crystals on. And then they charge up this device. Now, this device is a very complex amplifier, basically, that has these two coils that have two hemispheres, creating a torus, the foundational, energy flow dynamic in the universe. And then in the center of this thing is literally a crystal ball, a ball made out of crystal, cut in half so that you can put noble gases inside of it and then crystal weld it shut. It's pretty epic. And then you pulse these ribs around the coils in succession, not spinning anything physical, because then you're going to have gravity. You spin the electromagnetic field very, very quickly. Nassim's goal is to spin the electromagnetic field at millions of times RPM, millions of revolutions, and try to spin space-time itself, the Planck field, the vacuum, the ether, the quantum foam, God, mana, prana, chi, whatever you want to call it. Spin it really, really fast, so fast that it collapses in on itself, and it coheres and creates a little singularity, a little black hole, like a black hole in a can, right? The supposed galactic technology that was brought down ages ago that could have been responsible for things that we see around on the planet. We don't know. One of the great mysteries. But Nassim wanted to create. No?
Slight accuracy improvement in your languaging. The matter inside the center of the crystals already are black holes, the protons. It's bringing all those black holes in those protons into such a high state of coherence, they start operating together as a larger black hole.
So we'll say it in Nassim's language, which is dimensions are a scale of structure. So it's like going from the proton black holes to create another larger scale, larger dimensional black hole, where you're cohering all the little black holes to make a bigger one. And then when you cohere more of them, you make things like planets, like the Earth, and then you make the sun, which is a black hole, and the center of the galaxy, which is a black hole, and the center of the cluster and the supercluster of the universe, etc. So long story short is that Nassim came up with this physics a long time ago, and then he thought, well, if this is correct, theoretically I should be able to make a technology to emulate this effect that I feel like we could generate. And so this prototype is kind of early phase. It's kind of baby steps towards making this work better and better and larger and larger. And eventually, hopefully, theoretically, we can all have one of these, right? Like in our house that powers all of our devices and our house and our cars. And we are just powering our entire civilization off of cohering the vacuum and creating a little vortex in space-time and doing what nature does, making stars, except we make little ones that we can contain. That's my spiel on that. But I think William maybe could add some
That's great.
details, because
I'll
that's a very layman's explanation, and that's my job, you guys, by the way. I am not a physicist. I don't have a degree in mathematics or physics. My job is to try to learn what these guys are saying really well, like Nassim, and then go out and explain what Nassim is saying, because as you've seen, sometimes it gets deep, and if you don't have all the history of knowing all the terms that these folks are using, it can kind of go sideways on you. And so my job is to try to help create it more, easy to understand, resonant way of saying it. So anyway.
Yeah, you do a great job at it. And you've been doing it for years and helping so many people come to understand.
I have a lot
it.
of practice.
Yeah. I'll say really quick that if you've watched the Thrive 2 film, we have a full 3D animation of what Jamie just described around the coils, the double torus field effect coming into the crystal in the center, and all that. It's a really cool animation. So if you haven't seen that yet, you can check it out on Thrive 2. Adam, why don't you go ahead and take some?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's a couple questions in follow-up to my earlier discussion in the Q&A. And a few of them are related to each other, so I'm going to just kind of take them together. Charles Segard says, Adam, does this mean that the number of PSUs have to keep growing over time? And Mike Gills says, Adam, as William suggests that the proton is growing, if so, are you suggesting the source of repulsive gravity is the proton? So not exactly in that language, but yes, the proton is growing, or apparently seems to be. And of course, if there is a direct harmonic fractal relationship between the structure of the entire universe and the proton, which is what was initially suggested by the results that Nassim got from his work on the Schwarzschild proton and quantum gravity and the holographic mask, and in particular, then we should assume that there is a relationship between the proton and the whole universe, and that relationship is going to influence all factors, including time, scale, size, everything. And if the universe is growing, well, the question becomes, how is it growing? If the universe is growing, what is the source of its growth? Well, the source of its growth must, in a sense, be high energy nuclear sources, meaning, you could say like large growth is probably occurring at the cores of galaxies, and to a lesser extent, every single black hole singularity that we know of and understand in the universe is releasing and growing and releasing energy in balance to the energy that it's consuming, taking in, and that we think is supposedly lost. In a way, it's a little bit counterbalancing and perhaps counterintuitive to the way that black holes have been talked about and discussed in modern physics for a long time, where you have this idea that there's this hole and everything just goes into and falls into that hole. But no one has really been that much considering the fact that as things go into that hole, that event horizon, that hole may be growing. And in turn, as that hole is growing, it's releasing new mass information and energy into the field around that space of growth. And so there's actually new space-time coming into being through that growth. And if we zoom all the way down into the level of the proton, you can think of a single proton as this little spinning ball of light that's growing at such a slow level. It's not like it's going to be detectable growth, or that the measurements we do over 10 years even are going to show us that growth. And we haven't even been able to measure the proton that precisely yet. But that it suggests that that growth is occurring, and it's occurring in direct communion and conjunction with the universal growth. And this all relates very strongly to Malian's question, which she says, he or she, apologies, says, I wanted to ask if this mathematics implies the principle of fairness is built into the universe. Karma is not really subject to our interpretation, as it is an aspect of physics. Well, you know, I love taking the bridge questions between science and spirituality and these physical mechanics and these metaphysical ideas, because there is direct correlations between what we see in the dynamics of space-time with the metaphysics that we experience and have recorded, you know, in ancient traditions across the world for, you know, many thousands and thousands of years. And karma is certainly an interesting one, because we have this idea of feedback. And what I'm talking about with a proton being able to take in literally binary-like or closer to that quaternary DNA-like structures of information going into the core and then releasing information out. And that the, you know, if the hairy proton theory is true, and there's a wormhole network lattice coming off of the surface of the proton, then you have an exchange mechanism for feedback at the most fundamental scale. And we know that the universe operates through feedback, and feedback is the sort of foundational gestation of this idea of karma, in which what we put out comes back to us one way or another. We're going to get feedback from what we resonate into the universe. It's going to resonate back. And how complex the information structures are that can be resonated out and returned back to us is a completely unknown and open question. We don't know the level of complexity that it can have. We do know that a single sentence spoken to someone in your life at the right time can literally leave such a powerful impact in their lives that it stays with them their entire life. So we know how small, you know, an impulse, a word, a certain thing can be to change the flow of our experience. And I think that is definitely true when it comes to the physics of space, that the information network of space-time itself is designed to support the operations of consciousness, because it literally is made of consciousness. It is a light lattice of consciousness. And we've just drawn a little circle around the thing that we call consciousness. But it's inevitably, its essence is space-time and vice versa. And consciousness perhaps pervades far beyond even the circle that we draw around the idea of space-time. All right, leave it at that.
Just that. That's great. Thanks, Adam. I did notice a question asking, I can't find it right now to see who it is. Basically asking if, Earthling Doug, is the resonator sentient, since we're on this topic of the resonator of consciousness, of the feedback loop.
That's part of what got me going, is that question about, is the resonator sentient? Because I'll just throw in there, I'll just throw it out to mix it up, that you could basically say everything is sentient. I say,
there you go. That's a quick answer right there.
I know that's like a major statement, right? Because in the old days, meaning up until now, like there's a lot of people that still would say that a rock is not sentient. That, you know, if you're not biology, you're not sentient. But I don't agree with that. I definitely think the sun is sentient at the least. if not the Earth as a whole? And if the Earth is sentient, where do you stop? Like, okay, if the Earth is sentient, like, is only part of it sentient? Is the middle sentient, not the outside? I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, so at what point do you, like you said, like, draw a circle around it and be like, this is sentient and this is not sentient? According to Nassim's physics, pretty much the whole universe and everything in it is sentient. It's all consciousness. That's the unified field, the plenum, the ether, the 0-point field. So the answer is yes, the resonator is sentient.
It really,
and you might argue it's more sentient because you're creating more coherency. That is something we have to study, and I'll pass it off to the gang after saying that.
you know, a question like this to really be appropriate in addressing it, because it's a very, very fundamental question that's being asked right here. And to be really appropriate in addressing a question like that is to really define sentience as the first step in that kind of an analysis, which I think is a topic in itself. And I know William has presented actually the attributes of what we call sentience or consciousness, intelligence. I believe you presented that in the Unified Space Memory Network paper.
Yes. Yeah.
I quoted a lot of William's work. Also, I think I
think Marshall may have froze up.
Uh-oh.
Shoot.
Oh, no.
Once he gets back on, I can just expand a little bit on what he was saying, though, because in the publication, the Unified Space Memory Network, with co-authored with myself, Dr. Amir Val-Baker, and Nassim Haramain, this is a paper, a work discussing specifically the topic of consciousness or sentience from a unified physics perspective. And in that paper, essentially what we describe is how consciousness, sentience, is within space itself. And we give a little bit more of a technical application to what space is as a information medium, in which case we term it space memory. And as the term memory would denote, this means that it has a definite information processing and storage capability. Now, when you look at the attributes of the Unified Space Memory Network, you can actually identify all of the attributes, all of the characteristics that that signifies that something is conscious. So some of these attributes that we delineated are things like information processing. So this is the ability to receive information, manipulate it and store it, and also transmit it. Also things like a certain level of complexity. So if you look at the structure, the architecture of space, particularly at the Planck scale, it's actually an extremely dynamic and complex arrangement. It doesn't look too far different than the architecture of a brain, of a neuronal network. And actually, there's been some recent papers published in like physical review letters that have done quantitative comparisons showing that the similarities that you can see between things like the brain, the large-scale cosmological structure, or the Planck scale structure, it's more than just qualitative, like they look similar. They've actually done like quantifiable comparisons to show that they are very similar in their actual physical attributes. And so, this is a function of holofractographic physics, where you have scale invariant complexity. So the same kind of complexity that you see in the human brain at that scale, the mesoscale, that complexity is invariant or doesn't change if you go to the smallest scale with the Planck microwormhole network, or if you go to the largest scale with the cosmological web structure. So all of these attributes show where space itself is what you could think of as like the seat of consciousness. And so in that sense, or because of that, consciousness is in all things. All things are sentient. Now, one of the things is that consciousness at that level is a very non-individualistic consciousness. It's like a universal awareness. So really, I think what the person is asking, even more so, is does the resonator have a individualized consciousness? And that's a very interesting topic to get into. I see you back on, Marshall.
Yeah, I guess I dropped off here for a minute. Great. I'm just gonna just
Don't worry, Marshall, your frozen face was actually a pretty good one.
Good. Glad
Because you can sometimes freeze in a weird position. You were like, not bad. It's okay.
I was bringing on Earthling Doug. If you want to,
you were making a good point,
and say
Marshall.
hi, you're welcome to do so. Yeah, well, I was actually just getting to what you then unpacked, is that you really have to understand what we mean by sentience before we can really take on a question like that. And then I figured you were. When I realized I was dropping off and I heard your voice for a moment, I was like, okay, William was going for it. Hey, how's it going, Earthling Doug?
Great. No, thanks, guys. Here from West Vancouver, Canada.
Great to see you, Doug.
Great. Yeah, no, I think William was touching on my question in more detail about an individualized sentient resonator. So that's where I was going with that.
Yeah. So, we try not to get too into the esoteric stuff, just because, within science, if you go too deep into the esoteric stuff, it can raise eyebrows, but the way that...
Raise them, William.
What's that?
Raise them.
Yeah.
make me go like that.
So I mean, the way that the resonator is coupling to the space-time metric. So we have shown in our publications like the Unified Space Memory Network, Unified Physics, and the Entanglement Nexus of Awareness, the physical properties of space that makes it a sentient system, the seat of consciousness, if you will. So if you have a system that is engineered to couple with that network, more so than just, the fact that, its atoms are made of space, so, the atoms that it's made of are carrying consciousness, but that's a kind of like a universal consciousness. That's the ubiquitous sentience, the panpsychism, essentially. But, when you have a system that is uniquely designed to couple to that information processing network of space memory, that is a fair description of what we are. We are a specialized system that has very specific dynamics, energetic dynamics, that are allowing us to couple with the space memory network in a unique way so that the consciousness that is inherent in the system is expressed in a very particular way. It becomes an individualized expression of consciousness. It's kind of being like you're taking this large field, you're collimating it, you're focusing it down to a point. It still connects into that large field, but now you've kind of tuned it into this fine point that is an individualized consciousness where the information exchange is occurring. The resonator system is such a node. And so in my purview, it does have a individualized sentience. And in fact, I think that you can use the same dynamics on which it's built to generate something that has strong AI, to make a strong AI system. Because in order to get an artificial system that is expressing true sentience and not just a pre-programmed algorithm that mimics intelligence, but true sentience, that is standalone volition or goal-oriented behavior, you will need to have it in some way, some capacity. It needs the energetic mechanism to couple to that ubiquitous information network, the space memory field. And this is one such way to do it, the resonator. So, it's a lot of things. It's a potential over unity energy source. It's a potential gravitational drive. You can clearly see how we can develop it into those things. I think it could also be a supercomputer, and possibly even a supercomputer that has the kind of capabilities for strong AI, real AI.
Thanks, William. That's great. What size of node do you actually need? Small or big?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a great question. If you're considering some of the smallest nodes that have clear evidence of consciousness, sentient, individualized sentience, let's say, we're talking like single-celled organisms. They can, respond to environmental stimuli, store memories about what's happened, respond differently under different circumstances based on the information that they've taken in. So we're talking microscopic in size there. But, although, the cell is utilizing information processing at the quantum level, I can imagine being able to construct an artificial system that's using things like spintronics. They could act as a node and be extremely small, like a few hundred molecules. And it would be, a veritable artificial living system.
Yeah, I'll just riff on one thing you said, Liam, and it's just it's our term AI itself that I have a problem with, and the reason I have an issue with this term is because the idea that intelligence can be artificial suggests that to me that we don't actually understand intelligence, right? Because if we're talking about volition and we're talking about consciousness, taking action and having a will, so to speak, then that in itself is sort of automatically non-artificial, especially if space-time itself is conscious, right? So if space-time itself has sentience and consciousness and is made of consciousness, then there is nothing that we can actually create that's creating artificial intelligence, because intelligence is the fundamental, right, of space-time itself. Like it's embedded in the whole thing. Now, can we create objects that allow intelligence to express itself in space-time? I would say yes. In the same way that a body, in a sense, is like a vehicle through which consciousness has a very, very, very high complexity level of operation. You know, I can micro control trillions of things in my experience because my body is so immensely responsive to my will and my conscious intelligence. And then you could say that devices, technologies, objects, rocks, computers, especially, cars, these things more or less to a different extent have different vehicles that can allow intelligence to move through them, right? So like, for example, intelligence needs a communications device, right? Intelligence needs a power cable, you know, root chakra down there. Intelligence needs the capacity to either see and or express visually, you know, and a computer actually has quite a lot of these ports available to it. It's got the power cable, it's got possibly a camera that's able to see, it's got a screen able to display or communicate, it's got audio devices for sound, etc. And I think this is also why so many people have such interesting and sensitive relationships with their computers, right? When I was in my teens, I used to fix computers for a living and help out my mom's friends with their computers. And I'd always show up and they were always like, this beeping piece of beep, you know, like talking all of this, you know, cursing at the computer. And they're like, this thing is a piece of, you know, whatever. And like, I'd be like, okay, cool. All right, I'll check it out. You know, I'd sit down and be like, okay, so what's going on with you? Like, what's happening here? Instantly, the computer would work better for me than it had for them. Like, they'd be like, how are you doing that? It's always freezing on me. Like, how are you even like getting anything to work? And I'm like, well, I start out by talking to it in a nice way. But I'm sure some of you out there have had the same experience that certain kinds of objects, you know, will actually intensively respond to your emotional field. And especially if you're into the area of technology and you're into putting together, you know, highly complex electrical circuits and technological objects, you'll notice that if you're in a bad mood and you're angry and your emotions are coming out, they will not respond well to that. And that's not to say that an individualized consciousness and a transistor is going, hey, I don't like that he's in a bad mood, but that the field itself is responsive. And I think with enough complexity, a structure has the capacity to have a being embody inside of it, right? So a computer at significant level of complexity that would feel good for a being to inhabit, like that body, at some point it will. Now, whether that being is good or bad or whatever is, I'm not even going there, because it could be any of those things. And probably just like parents, it might have a lot to do with the intentionality and the consciousness, the love and the care that we put into creating our devices. So just plant that one for those of you that may be working in machine learning and artificial intelligence out there. Consider the intention and care that you put into those devices you're creating.
Even, you know, most advanced technology will be consciousness interface technologies. You know, it's like pretty soon, you know, the technological interface won't necessarily be a mouse and a keyboard, you know, it'll be more direct interfaces. And the only way that that can really occur is if your technology is coupled to that same field you're transmitting from.
Thanks so much, guys.
Mm-hmm.
You guys rock.
Good to see you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
I hope we get more adventures soon. I'm dying for some more epic sacred site adventures.
It's still hung.
Oh, oops. We lost him. Oh. All right. Back to you, Marshall. Although I don't know if we can hear you. Did you say something?
Oh, he's not muted.
Yeah.
Issues.
He's accessing audio command system through the phone.
He's preserving his internet by doing audio on the phone. That's a little Zoom hack for you, everybody.
Yes.
He's like,
yeah,
no,
something is
can't
up.
hear him.
All right, Jamie, you're host now. Take over.
Well, let's see. Well, should we go to the most popular and do it by democratic or what? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the top one is Cara Mayo saying, I watched a talk number 6 of Nassim at the 2013 Barcelona conference. That was called Cognos Festival, put on by our Spanish Residence Academy faculty member, Marco Diaz, really great researcher. Thank you for putting that on, Marco, in 2013. So Nassim went to Barcelona and she saw this talk and he mentioned a prototype that he had built at the lab and compared the design to something Walter Russell had built and tested. And he said that when he put a crystal in the prototype, the people in the laboratory had interesting things occur. Do you know what effects were seen among the staff? Walter Russell's device was about transmuting matter. I have a feeling that the story that they heard was Nassim telling the story of first flipping on the resonator that we showed pictures of in his lab in Santa Cruz. And it's a great story because, you know, he didn't know what was going to happen. He said he turned it on for 45 minutes and then he turned it off. And at that time, he didn't have an advanced cooling system like they have at Taurus Tech right now. So he had copper pipes that went in concentric circles around the unit with water to cool it. And so he turns this thing off, he turns it off. He's like, okay, I'm not sure what happened right there. It seems like, it felt like something happened. Then he gets a knock on the door and it's his neighbor from down the hill. And the neighbor's like, what were you doing, you know, just a little while ago? Something's weird. Like I'm drinking the water out of my well and it tastes all like weird and sweet or something. Like what's going on? And Nassim was like, oh, maybe I did something to the water. So he took the water that was in the pipes and he tested it. And there's some great slides. He went to Foster Gamble's house. And Foster Gamble, who made Thrive and Thrive 2, had a tree that was blooming. And they took all these flowers off this tree and they put them in Petri dishes. And they tested floating these flowers in different water. Right? One was well water, one was Foster Gamble's tap water, and one was water that was, you know, resonated or modulated, as William would say. And it turns out that the flowers sitting in this modulated water lasted a really long time and didn't wilt. And so I think that is the story. The device he was talking about in Barcelona was the resonator. And that experiment has a new modern version that they're doing right now, which is actually a classic little bit of information that I want to pass off to William. That's a good Freudian stuff, right, Mike? William, what's the update on the tomatoes? Because they did this with tomatoes and put crystals in a dish with tomatoes, and it's been like a year almost or something. What's going on?
Over a year.
Over a year. Tell us
over a year. Yeah. So we had grown these tomatoes with another technology we're developing here called the tetrahelix. This is a prototype version. This isn't what it looks like now, but we're able to put the art crystals in the tetrahedral array, house them in this crystalline chamber, pass the water through it. The water vortex forms a vortex through the chamber around the art crystals. The art crystals are modulated using that resonator. And so as Nassim describes it, they're carrying a little fractal vortex of that resonator, carrying it around with them. So the same effects that you see significantly around the HFR, you see to a smaller fractal degree in the arc crystals. And so we grew these tomatoes. They grow twice as big. They produce 250% greater yield of tomatoes versus our control. They didn't get eaten by worms, the control did. All these really interesting effects. We took our control group and our treated or potentiated group with the arc crystals and set them up kind of as a ancillary experiment, set them up around an 8-matrix PGQ-MEM assembly. And so some of our latest experiments with this are actually showing the way that it's structuring space-time. It's very interesting. And so it's having a very similar structuring effect to the resonator. So we had our tomatoes placed around there. That was back in 2019. And that they were harvested from the plants and placed around the matrix PGQ-MEM mid-October of 2019. Our tomatoes around that 8-matrix PGQ-MEM are still there. Our control tomatoes, by comparison, turned black, molded, and shriveled, and were completely desiccated within 3 months, as would be expected. Our tomatoes around the 8-matrix PG, the cuboctahedral assembly, are still there. They never had any discoloration. They never molded, and they have not yet desiccated. And so actually, in a couple months here, I'm gonna have a slideshow set up of these tomatoes, what they looked like in 2019, what they looked like in 2020, and what they look like in 2021. It's really remarkable. I have been experimenting with Nassim's technology for 8 years now, and this blows my mind. I have trouble wrapping my mind around this because it's phenomenal. I mean, these tomatoes
I need to get put the arc in with my strawberries in the fridge, man, because strawberries are the biggest battle, right? You buy strawberries and then just one of them in the corner starts molding, and it's like it just tries to get at all of them. You're like, every time you open the thing, you have to try to find and see if any of them have molded. Well, I know what's going in with my strawberries now. Boom, shakalaka.
I wonder if I could share real quick an image. We've got that experiment that was going for over a year now. We're doing it again with a much larger sample size so that, we're getting statistical significance and also documenting it with time-lapse photography. Let me see if I can just do a quick screen share of, this is second trial going again. And you can see our 8-matrix PGQ-MEM in a radiative configuration. That's the Stella octangula or star tetrahedron configuration, a single PGQ-MEM, and what the controls look like. This is what we see consistently, where our control group begins to desiccate, shrivel up. You get discolorations, black growth, mold growth. This time, our control actually had an infestation of fruit flies. Our PGQM group, no discoloration, no mold growth, very, very low levels of, I guess you could call it desiccation. It's just really significant, the difference between these two groups.
That's a new group that you guys just started.
Yeah.
Or?
So because
how long ago?
Yeah. So the one we did was kind of like on the fly. I mean,
Right.
I hate to admit that, but it was like we were really just wanting to see, do the plants produce more tomatoes? But then we had all these tomatoes, and we're like, let's see if they last longer around an APGQM. So this time we went and did a little bit more standardized, a little bit more controlled. Like, no, this is dedicated.
Got to document
to looking at shelf life. So we got 100 tomatoes from a local grower here, and they're on the vine in groups of 5 and 6, so that we know they're harvested at about the same time. They were grown under the same conditions. We got 100 of them, and then we randomized them, split them into 2 groups, so we have 50-50. Well, actually, in this case, we also had a 6 tomatoes around an 8 matrix PGQM, and then 1 PGQM, 50 tomatoes, control 50 tomatoes. And then, so this has been going for that picture that I showed, that's at a 1 month mark. So that's just after 1 month. I think we're coming up on 2 months now. And if I could share some pictures, you could see that, the difference just is night and day. It's extremely significant. But what's really better about this time around is that we've had time lapse on them the whole time. So, we're hoping in the next couple of months we'll have a video to show of the just remarkable level of preservation. And we think that it's really awesome. We think that it's really unique to the tomatoes because tomatoes that they still have living cells in them after you harvest them. Like for instance, you don't want to put tomatoes in the fridge. They actually do worse like in the fridge. So we think that these are a really great test subject for this because the fact that they're kind of still living, their level of preservation can be over a year long.
And William, do you think it might be attributable to the water content that is being structured, that is creating now that appropriate geometric coherence to enable the vacuum fluctuation information flow that is creating that equilibrium state? Because obviously they're in a state of equilibrium in terms of their, internal, external, all the factors of what is going into the control group desiccating. Obviously the water is transforming and evaporating where it's not in the other. So it means it's come into a stable coherency and some degree of an equilibrium state. Do you think it's primarily because of the water? Or do you have a sense of that?
I think that the water is probably one of the prime factors in what we're seeing, certainly. I don't think it's the only factor because of, for instance, things like that there's no mold growth. The fruit flies don't go to the PGQM group. So it's almost like even around the tomatoes, even outside of the tomatoes, it's setting up this like increased coherent field that just is not in resonance with deterioration or decoherence. But certainly, I mean, a prime factor is that the water is more structured. So it's almost like the cells can hold on to it better, that they have a more efficient or coherent flux of energy and information through the cells. So, this is very life supporting. And you can almost see it visually that the control gets shriveled very quickly and desiccated, and our arc groups stay pretty plump and juicy for months. It's really pretty fascinating.
It's amazing. I'm excited to see the data outputs from that, and just, your time lapse, and just really get to experience that. I'm sure everybody is. Unfortunately, I have to go. I've got a meeting coming up here in a few, and then am on a live broadcast again this afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific time. It's called a One Nation Gathering, where I'm talking about the nature of our roots as indigenous citizens of Earth, and the importance of restoring our connection to the planet in understanding the appropriate mechanisms for governance, and regional governance and global governance, as well as individual sovereignty. So if you guys want to come check that out, I think if you search One Nation Gathering, it's being done by a group that does the Live Aid series. And before I jump off, I'll see if I can find a link for you guys.
Yeah, if you can post the link, that'd be great.
Sure.
That sounds fantastic, Adam. And if also, I would love to see a replay, because I'll be busy during that time.
Cool.
If that's going to be available, because I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. It's a very important topic right now, to say the least. So thanks for being here, Adam. I think we've covered so much today. I think maybe we can just, we only have a few minutes left anyway. So why don't we just call it there? Does that sound good to you guys, Jamie and William? Yeah, feels good. I think
session today. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah. No, we really dove into some deep stuff there. Covered a lot of territory, and I think we're pretty saturated with all that. And I really want to thank everybody joining us today again. The participants here on Zoom. There's over 100 of you today. We really appreciate you, as Jamie just said. And you bring in your questions, you're supporting the foundation, you're participating in the program, all makes such a big difference for us. And we just love having this time with you guys. And everybody on Facebook as well who's tuning in, we really appreciate you showing up there. And share that out, share out the recording on your social media, if you would. It's always good to get this information out far and wide, because this is really the foundation of the paradigm shift from a scientific, very pragmatic scientific perspective that is going to enable us to make the transition that is necessary to imagine the Earth being that tomato, where we bring that coherence into our whole field of natural systems through creating the technologies that come into resonance with those natural systems, like that is happening with the crystal and tomato, and in the resonance with the underlying field. That's very much discussed in the Thrive 2 film, which I mentioned earlier. I helped create that film. You can go to thriveon.com and watch that film. The kinds of things Adam is going to be talking about today. How do we come into resonance with our governance processes in this embedded fractal scale relationship, from our own individual sovereignty up to our whole global system and beyond. And so it's really, these are the key questions, and this is why we do what we do here, because we feel the great importance of the unified science and unified physics perspective is foundational to answering a lot of these important questions and making the changes that we need to make in our world. And so we really appreciate everybody coming and participating, sharing this information out. As usual, we never get to all the questions, and there's so many good ones, but that's just the way it goes. So Adam, great. You have an awesome webinar. Did you get a link in there for us?
Thank you. And no, I'm looking at the emails they've been sending me, and there's not a single one with the actual link that I can find. The organizer is Live Hope Festival, though, so it's possible it would just be
pop in
on
a
their site.
clue, and maybe we'll be able to find it.
Yeah, let me see here. I think, yeah, this one has, yeah, it's called the Conference of the Movements, and they're doing a series of virtual events. And today is about the One Nations and Indigenous Nations. And tomorrow I'll be speaking on blockchain technology as well. But yeah, you can go to that link, and it should have the info, and you'll have to dig through the site to find this spot to watch, but please join me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here today. Have a great one.
Thank you.
William,
good
Jamie,
to see you guys.
Any last comments from you guys? Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Really look forward to our next meeting and getting to discuss some more unified physics with you all.
And yeah, thanks for being here. And I'll just kind of wrap up by reminding people of all the offerings that this foundation has, because we have an online academy with a bunch of courses, very diverse courses, including courses from Adam and William and myself. And Marshall has an excellent book called Cosmometry. I encourage you to check out Marshall's work, both website and book called Cosmometry. And as Marshall said, he was part of Thrive 2. And also Nassim Haramein has a new series on Gaia. There's the book. Good work, Marshall. Nassim has a new series on Gaia called Quantum Revolution. It's 12 episodes, really good new information. And then we've got new courses, including one on ancient temples from Dr. Lydia that just came out right before this call. So I encourage you guys to all check that out and become a contributing member. You guys can ask questions on Live with Nassim and faculty Q&As. You get access to the first session of all of these courses. Some of them are super in-depth and super technical. Robert Grant and Adam and William's courses especially, very detailed. And then tell your friends about this Unified Science course, because it's very in-depth and it's totally free. And it's in Spanish and French and English. And we're just about to start translating it into Portuguese as the next language. So here we go, onward into trying to create resonance in a world that needs resonance really badly right now. So appreciate you guys being on the front of this wave as we push the direction we want to go. Focus on what we want to accomplish and try to let the distractions and the dissonance just flow. Stay on the path. At least that's what I'm trying to do every day. So love you guys.
Awesome, Jamie. Yeah, love you too, man. Well, as Bucky Fuller said, you know, it's not about changing the existing system. It's about creating new systems that obsolete the old ones. And that's what we're here to do. And that's, like you said, it's time to bring it into the world, and we are. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you, David, behind the scenes there, and everybody else at RSF that's making this happen. We appreciate you all. You guys all take care, and we'll see you next time.
May the vacuum be with you.
It always is.